I was rinsing spinach in our wobbly colander, phone tucked into my shoulder, when the envelope slid under our apartment door with that soft, accusatory whisper only paper manages. The return address was a national bank. The windowed section showed my name, spelled correctly for once, even the accent on the A that most forms ignore. It should have felt flattering. Instead, my stomach dropped like a misfired elevator. "Babe?" Colin called from the couch. "We out of olive oil?" "I bought some yesterday," I said, drying my hands on a dish towel. The towel left my fingers damp. The envelope left my throat drier. I opened it with the flat of a butter knife, worried about somehow hurting myself on the truth. Inside, tasteful brochure, glossy card carrier, a letter that said welcome to your new platinum rewards and thank you for your application, and a rectangle of plastic already pushing itself free from the perforated prison. The card's silver face gleamed. The embossed name read Amélie Tran. That's me. 24 years old, graphic designer at a tiny agency with a blue neon sign that flickers when it rains. I own 2 succulents and a sourdough starter that threatens to revolt each summer. I did not own this card. Did you open a new account? I asked the room, which technically included the couch, which technically included Colin. "Open what?" he said, attention still tethered to the muted basketball game. He wore the same gray hoodie I'd started calling his shell. "This." I held the card up. He didn't look. I took a photo instead, the flash betraying my hand's tremor, and texted it to him. His phone lit up with the picture. He still didn't look. Your phone's bright," he said. "You're gonna drain it." I shut off the screen. I didn't apply for this. My voice sounded alarmingly calm, like a traffic report that ends in catastrophe. "Must be a mistake." "Toss it." "People say that." "Toss it." "Burn it." As if you can just throw away a thing that says, "We know your full legal name, the last 4 of your social, and your credit history." As if the mistake belongs to paper. As if the paper won't swirl into your life like a storm. I didn't toss it. I slid the letter back into the envelope and set it on the counter while the spinach wilted in its bowl. I searched my email for platinum rewards and thank you for your application. Nothing. I searched my spam, because sometimes the universe hides the worst things in trash. Still nothing. I called the bank. A woman with a bright, trained smile in her voice asked to verify my identity. I gave what she asked. She told me the card had been applied for online 2 weeks ago, shipped last week, and activated yesterday. Activated? I said. Yes, Miss Tran. And there are some pending charges, an electronics store, a sports bar, and a boutique gym membership. I didn't. I can put a freeze on the card while we investigate. You should, I said, and then, because the part of me that rearranges flour and water into bread also rearranges fear into questions, I asked, how was it activated? By phone, she said. Caller confirmed security questions. I pressed my thumb between my eyebrows until a headache bloomed. Can you tell me which number they called from? I can't share that, she said gently. But I can add a note that you've reported this as unauthorized, and I'll connect you with our fraud department to begin the formal process. Before that, I recommend you pull your credit report and consider freezing your credit with the bureaus. The phone's speaker made her sound far away. Or maybe she was far away. Maybe she was sitting under a poster that said thank you for being a valued customer while sipping coffee from a mug that said traceable. Please freeze it, I said. And yes, connect me. She patched me through and I filled out an online form while a recorded voice explained I might be eligible for a one-time sign-up bonus. I tried to laugh. I couldn't even feel my face. When I hung up, the card was frozen, and a case number sat in my email, sterile and official. For a second I let my forehead rest against the cabinet door. The wood smelled like lemons and old varnish. The kitchen hummed. The world continued, as if my name attached to an expensive rectangle of someone else's debt were just a plotline in the long-running sitcom called adulthood. Behind me, the couch springs creaked. "So?" Colin asked. He twirled the drawstring of his hoodie around his finger, a nervous tick he believed looked casual. It always had a way of winding tighter. "It was activated yesterday," I said, watching him. "By phone." "Huh," he said, eyes slipping, then catching a flinch. If you've ever worked with clients, you learn to watch micro-movements, the way a brow reacts before a mouth catches up. "Did you?" I began, then shook my head. "No. You wouldn't." "What?" He offered the open-armed incredulity that men are taught, the posture that says, "How could you even?" It had worked, once. It looked like a shirt that doesn't fit anymore. "I don't know," I said. And I didn't. I knew I'd never activated a card in my name that I hadn't applied for, and someone had. I knew we shared a tiny one-bedroom overlooking a discount mattress store because rents in this city were an insult wrapped in a joke. I knew he'd been laid off from the warehouse back in March and had since been, in between opportunities, which is a phrase like a hallway, you can live there, but not forever. "I'm making tacos," I said finally, and I did. I made tacos as if the world were normal. You can do anything while you saute onions. The thing about disasters is they choose boring hours. When my grandpa died, the call came while I was in the checkout line with dish soap and raspberries. When my credit card got hacked, I was buying bus fare. When I discovered the charges on the new card in my name, were increasing, it was 3:30 on a Tuesday, and I was designing an event poster featuring a cello and a watercolor splash that read chamber music in the park. I got a fraud department email saying additional activity detected and nearly dumped coffee into my keyboard. I pulled up the account portal the bank had created for me. The list of transactions was a timeline of someone else's life layered on top of mine: late-night Wing King takeout, a $1,299 charge at an electronics store for a gaming laptop, monthly fees for Beast Mode Fitness, a ride share to an address across town. I stared so long, numbers became insects. I'd never been to Beast Mode Fitness. My fitness routine involved lifting a bag of cat litter named Mr. Pink and walking too fast. I locked the screen and went looking for Colin. He'd said he was going to look at a gig. He had a way of misplacing hours like spare change. When he came home, he dropped a paper bag on the counter with the performance of a man bringing peace offerings. Inside, stale croissants from a bakery that overflowed each morning and emptied by noon. "If you're going to bring home bribes," I said, "you should bring them fresh." He blinked. "Bribes?" "There are charges on that card," I said, voice steady by force. "A lot of charges." "Did you open it?" He shook his head. He shook his head like it had been waiting all day to shake. "No." "Then how?" "I don't know, am. Identity theft is a thing." He walked to the sink and turned on the faucet. He didn't have a glass. Water ran anyway, a lazy exhale. "Didn't your friend Priya have that happen?" "They bought, a whole washing machine on her." "She did," I said, because it was true. Priya had spent 6 months untangling it. "But you activated the card, Colin." He turned, indignant now. "Why do you think it was me?" "I didn't want it to be him. I wanted some faceless thief." I wanted a dog in a trench coat. I wanted a glitch. I wanted to not be asking my boyfriend if he'd slid my identity on like a jacket and taken it out to the bar. Because you know my mother's maiden name. Because you once posted my high school mascot on Instagram for Throwback Thursday. Because you can answer all the stupid questions the bank asks to prove I'm me. That's not proof. It's not, I agreed. But the electronics store security footage will be. His face did something then, a calculation too slow to hide. You're only thinking that because he reached for me. Listen. This is us. He did the thing where he made a small circle in the air, the us bubble, he called it when we were new, and he wanted to be tender and I wanted to be wanted. If I needed a card, I'd just ask. You did, I said. My chest felt tight, like I was wearing the wrong size heart. You asked last month and I said no. Not until you had a job again. Not in my name. He laughed, and the laugh cracked. I meant, like, if I needed an emergency card. This is us. We're a team. Teams don't hide cards in each other's names, I said. I froze it. What? The word was too loud for our square of kitchen. I froze the card. The bank did. It's part of the fraud case. He stared, surprised enough that the pretense fell off his face. There it was, the moment when a person becomes a mirror and you see yourself reflected in their worst decision. You froze it, he repeated, softer. Seriously? Seriously. The faucet choked itself off. We stood in the remains of the day, a sink full of unrinsed coffee cups, wilting cilantro, the envelope now folded into a horse because I fold paper when I panic, a silver rectangle resting like a tiny knife. He rubbed the seam of his hoodie between forefinger and thumb and didn't look at me. So, what, you want me to call them? Tell them it's my card? Pay it off? It's not your card, I said. It's mine. You opened it in my name. He didn't deny it this time. He didn't confirm it either. He exhaled the way people do at the end of long movies. I had a lead, he said finally. A friend from the warehouse, remember Jamal? He's doing this import thing on the side. He needed a boost, just short-term, just to keep inventory moving, and he said he'd cut me in big when the first shipment flips. I was going to pay the card before the statement. And the laptop? I asked, voice swallowing itself. For the hustle, he said. My old one can barely run email. And the gym? I was going to get in shape, he said, with a flare of indignation, as if that made loyalty a reasonable interest rate. Something inside me went still. I have made countless tiny, careful choices, packing lunch, turning off lights, saving 10%, buying secondhand. I had delayed gratification so often it had become my default setting. And here was someone buying a future with my name because he believed his tomorrow deserved an investment my today did not. You could have told me, I said, but it wasn't a question. I knew you'd say no, he said, which at least was true. We ate the stale croissants for dinner. They tasted exactly like defeat. The next day I did boring things that felt like new muscles, contacted the credit bureaus to freeze my credit, filed an identity theft report with the FTC, scheduled an appointment to request a copy of the electronics store footage, called the bank's fraud department and took notes like this was a class where the final was my future. Should I file a police report? I asked the bank's rep, a man named Joel with a voice like an old sweater. It can help, he said. It creates a paper trail, and for some disputed charges it's required. It's up to you. It's up to me, I repeated, tasting the words. So much had been up to me lately. I told my boss I needed the morning off to handle a personal issue. I told Priya everything. Priya said, her mouth aligning into something like rage. That's fraud. Honey, that's financial abuse. Is it? I asked. My skin prickled like it had stepped into sunlight. I'd been calling it a mistake. A misunderstanding. A misaligned intention. Giving it a name made it heavy enough to hold. She went soft around the eyes. Come stay with me if you need to. I can handle it, I said, and was surprised to find I believed it. I froze it. I'm letting him deal with the consequences. I am lighting a candle that the gym has a terrible cancellation policy, she said, and made me laugh, and I loved her so much for making space for air. When I got home, the apartment smelled like the cologne Colin wore when he needed to feel armored. He'd shaved. He sat at the table with the bank's number in front of him. When he saw me, he attempted a smile that would have worked on me 2 years ago. Look, he said. I'll call them now. I'll figure it out. You can sit here so you know I'm not hiding anything. Okay, I said, and sat across from him. I put my phone on the table. I opened the Notes app because I am, if nothing else, a recorder of facts. He put the bank on speaker, which is how the rep's voice filled our kitchen and made it sound like a courtroom. It was a different rep this time, a woman named Eliza. She sounded like she had seen everything twice. Hi, Colin said, bright and saccharine. So, my girlfriend's card got mistakenly frozen. Eliza's pause was expert. Your girlfriend? Yeah, he said, friendly. We share finances. The freeze is messing with our ability to. For security, she said, I need to speak with the cardholder. Is Amélie Tran available? I lifted my hand like we were in 3rd grade. He looked at me, tight. He covered the phone with his palm. Just tell her to unfreeze it, he hissed. I'll fix it. No, I said, calm as a lake. He removed his hand. She's here. Eliza's voice sharpened a degree, the way you sharpen a pencil, not a knife. Miss Tran, do you authorize this caller to speak on your behalf? I do not, I said, and watched the statement land. But I'm willing to be present for the conversation while he clarifies his relationship to the account. Eliza did not sigh, but the sigh was present anyway. Mr. What is your last name, sir? Clark, Colin said. He had the nerve to sound put out. Mr. Clark, Eliza said, in what capacity are you related to this account? I activated the card, he said, as if we were talking about a light switch. Did you apply for it? We're a team, he said. It was for both of us. For our documentation, Eliza said, was Ms. Tran's consent obtained before the application was submitted? I stared at him. He stared at a smudge on the table. She knew I was handling stuff, he said. I did not, I said. Eliza continued as if reading from a script she'd written with her own blood. Mr. Clark, I need to inform you that applying for credit in another person's name without their explicit authorization may constitute fraud. For your protection and ours, I cannot discuss this account with you. Ms. Tran, the freeze remains in place. We will continue our investigation. Please check your email for an affidavit to sign. Colin bristled. Listen, this is ridiculous. We live together. We're basically engaged. We are not, I said, because sometimes truth belongs out loud. Mr. Clark, Eliza said, I can understand this is frustrating. If there is a dispute about who is responsible for the charges, that is a matter between you and Ms. Tran and, if necessary, law enforcement. From the bank's perspective, without authorization from the cardholder, we cannot grant you access. It's for a business, he said, veering, his voice pitching higher. I'm an entrepreneur. I wish you the best with your venture, Eliza said, laminated politeness sliding back into place. Miss Tran, do you have any additional questions? I did. I had 1,000 questions about how many ways people find to justify theft from the people who love them. I had questions about ethics and the economy and why 7 out of 10 women I know have a story that starts with, he swore he'd pay me back. I had practical questions, too. So I asked them, what happens to my credit score? How long does an investigation take? What documentation do you need? How can I prevent this in the future? Eliza answered with clear instructions. She told me the bank would likely reverse the charges, but it might take time. She told me to send a copy of my police report when I filed it. She told me to consider changing passwords and the answers to my security questions. When we hung up, the room was hushed, the kind of quiet that follows a break, the before and after separated by a small dial tone. You didn't have to do that, Colin said, low. You made me look like an idiot. You did that yourself, I said. I just made sure the person on the phone wasn't confused. What am I supposed to do now? His voice, stripped of bluster, found a softer center. He was still a person I had known, he was also the person who had done this. Both were true, and there are no instructions for the tone to take with such contradictions. You're going to call the electronics store and see if they'll cancel the laptop order before it ships, I said, because I've learned the value of letting people solve the problems they create. You're going to cancel the gym membership. You're going to text Jamal and tell him you're out of whatever scheme he has, because you cannot finance anything with a card that belongs to someone else. And you're going to start paying me rent tomorrow. Cash. I don't have it, he said. Then you're going to the temp agency, I said, and you're going to get it. A shadow crossed his face, anger passing like a cloud, then left it. He stared at his hands. He looked, for once, as young as we are, which is to say more child than adult, trying on the word responsibility like a shirt that doesn't fit yet. You're serious? Yes, I said. He didn't apologize. I noticed. Not apologizing is a kind of statement, too. I filed the police report. It felt strange and surreal, like naming a ghost. The woman at the desk wore a bun so tight it made my scalp ache in sympathy. She never looked surprised. When I explained, she nodded, typed, and handed me a case number. She has seen everything twice, too. I changed every password. I changed security questions to answers only I would know, my first crashing computer, the name of the street my mother would invent in stories, nonsense that held meaning like a folded note. I made a spreadsheet because spreadsheets comfort me the way weighted blankets comfort other people. I set calendar reminders for when to follow up. I learned how to pull my credit report, which felt like reading a diary I didn't remember writing. The electronics store canceled the laptop, it hadn't shipped. The gym laughed at Colin when he tried to cancel. He had used my birthday as the pin on the account, and in his panic, he mixed up the numbers under Eliza's dispassionate hold music, and now he was having to go into the gym to sign a cancellation in person in front of a desk clerk who made $15 an hour to watch men beg. I found this both unfair to the desk clerk and satisfying to me. He came home with a paper from the gym and a flyer for a kettlebell class if he wanted to reconsider. He dropped both on the table without comment and went to the bedroom, where he closed the door and, for the first time since we'd moved in, locked it. That night I slept on the couch. Our cat, Mr. Pink, took the opportunity to resume his place on my ribcage, purring like a small engine. There are kinds of comfort that arrive on their own schedule. In the morning, I woke to the sound of a shower and then the smell of coffee that was somehow both apology and bribe. He handed me a mug like a peace flag. I took it. I'm not iron. I got a day's shift unloading at the produce market, he said. Cash. Jamal's pissed. I don't care. I'll get the rent. Good, I said. He stared at the floor, the place where he'd once sprawled with my feet in his lap the first winter I lived here. He said without looking up, I didn't think it would be a big deal. People do it all the time. Everyone I know lives on credit. Everyone I know lives on rent and leftovers and the hope that maybe we'll have a little extra someday, I said. That card's not a little extra. That card could make it so someday never comes. He nodded, but it was the nod you do to end a conversation you don't want to keep having. We lived adjacent after that, like parallel lines in the same geometry problem. He worked the markets. I worked the agency. We ate the same food and said different grace. I kept a bag by the door with my passport and a week's worth of clothes because sometimes a part of you prepares you to leave before the rest of you catches up. The bank sent updates, an investigation was underway, disputed charges were reversed temporarily, any merchant who contested would require more documentation. I sent them what they asked for. I took a photo of the gym cancellation and forwarded it with a subject line that read, evidence. I wanted my subject lines to sound like promises. The electronics store's security footage came as a low-resolution clip that made the world look like it had been vacationing in a previous decade. But the man in the hoodie buying the laptop was clearly Colin. He did not look guilty. He looked like a person who believed he was merely taking what the world owed him and using an easier route to collect. I forwarded the clip to the detective assigned to my case. I attached a note that read, "This is my boyfriend." Or he was. I'm not sure what to call him now. I hovered over send and then sent it anyway. Naming the shape of a transition doesn't make it more graceful, but it does clarify the steps. At night, I wrote in my journal until the noise inside me made sense. I said things there I couldn't say to him, that I missed the version of us that had never existed, that being a woman sometimes felt like running a marathon that someone else started on your behalf and then blamed you for when you stopped to breathe, that I had spent years being low maintenance, easygoing, cool, the girlfriend who brings beer to barbecues and patience to arguments and who doesn't throw a scene, and now here I was, freezing a credit card and filing a police report and learning to be a person who says no without apologizing for saying it. It was almost disappointing how quickly the next part of the story happened. No big confrontation. No dramatic exit. It was a Tuesday, and the bus was late. I watched a woman on the bus shelter bench slide a paper bag over the bottle at her feet like we couldn't see and thought, this is what pretending looks like. I got off 2 stops early, walked past a for rent sign hung so hastily it flapped like a wing, and called the number. The agent showed me the studio that afternoon, a place the size of a generous closet that smelled like pine cleaner and hope. The walls were the kind of white that wants to be a paint chip name. The windows faced a brick wall that caught the late sun and sent it back like a warm shrug. I'll take it, I said, because sometimes you know. Don't you want to run numbers first? The agent asked. I've been running numbers since I was old enough to count, I said. I'll take it. I told Priya. She cheered. She came over with a roll of bubble wrap that might have been a hug and helped me pack. We moved the next Saturday. We carried my life down 3 flights of stairs in boxes that used to hold kale. Colin carried 2 boxes and then sat on the stoop and watched. When the truck was full, he looked at me with a question I didn't have an answer for, and I kissed Mr. Pink on the head and told him I'd be back for him once I knew the new place was safe. My landlord had to approve pets, and Mr. Pink preferred discretion. If love is a sequence of logistics, I was mastering it. A.M., Colin said, standing and taking a step toward me. Wait. For what? I asked. A breeze lifted a plastic bag into the air like a balloon that didn't know it was trash. I'll pay you back, he said. Okay, I said, because sometimes saying okay is a neutral ground, not agreement. You have my Venmo. You're really going, he said, as if I had not been carrying boxes for an hour. I'm really going, I said, and texted the detective later that I'd updated my address. At the new place, Priya sat on the floor and helped me build a bed frame using an Allen wrench that felt like a talisman. This is so cute, she said. You could fit 2 more of these in your old living room. That sounds exhausting, I said. I only want to fit me. We ate dumplings out of cartons and watched terrible TV in a way that felt like medicine. I fell asleep before the second episode, and woke to sunlight finding my eyes and a sense of quiet I didn't recognize yet as mine. The bank closed the investigation a month later. They sent a letter saying they had reversed the charges permanently and noted the account would be closed once the dispute window ended. They recommended I keep the fraud alert in place on my credit file for a year. The letter included that neutral, careful language I'd come to recognize: we empathize, we regret, we advise, we remind. I read it like a certificate I hadn't wanted framing my wall. The detective called to say the case would not be pursued further. Without a prior record, the DA's office is focused on higher dollar incidents, she said, and I believed both that she meant it and that she did not have the resources to make meaning more than a voicemail. Does that mean he can just do it again? I asked. It means he can face consequences next time, she said, blunt and not unkind. And it means you did what you needed to do. What I needed, it turned out, was to learn I could. There should be a training in middle school, how to freeze a credit card and unfreeze yourself. I would have been an eager student. Colin texted twice, a photo of cash with the caption "First rent payment" and then, 2 weeks later, "Can we talk?" I sent a thumbs up to the first and nothing to the second. He sent another message: it wasn't that big a deal. I stared at that one so long the screen dimmed. I wanted to respond with a seminar about the size of deals. I wanted to quote statistics I'd Googled at 2 a.m. about financial control in relationships. Instead, I deleted the thread. I had the detective's number and the bank's, and those were the only numbers I wanted to have memorized for a while. Meanwhile, life resumed the way a river reclaims its bed after a landslide. At work, I designed posters for a vintage market, a blood drive, a lecture titled Urban Bees. I learned the faces of my neighbors: the woman with giant headphones who smelled like cinnamon rolls, the guy who watered his balcony plants in a ceremony I started timing with my coffee, the kid who skateboarded past my window with the concentration of an athlete in training. On Sundays, I went to the farmer's market and bought a single apple like it was a gift. I started running because I didn't have to talk when I ran, and the world slid into linear motion. I took a self-defense class with Priya and learned to say, "Stop," in a way that even strangers believed. I updated my budget and watched, with something like wonder, as the numbers began to shape a future that included me. I brought Mr. Pink home. My landlord approved the cat with the indifferent magnanimity of someone who has met cats before. Mr. Pink explored the new studio like an inspector general. He found the one patch of sun and claimed it. I took that as a sign. One afternoon, while sorting the final box of miscellaneous, the box every move ends with, the one labeled Misk in Sharpie with a knowing sigh, I found the silver card. I had thrown away the envelope months ago. Somehow the card itself had slipped between 2 notebooks. It was inert now, a chip that would never wake up again, a number erased from ledgers. The face of it still gleamed, my name embossed, permanent in a way the account had not been. I took it to the kitchen and cut it in half with the heavy orange-handled scissors my mother gave me when I left for college. I cut through the name first, then the chip, then again, until the pieces were confetti. It wasn't a ceremony. It felt more like a chore, satisfying, necessary, done. I swept the shards into my palm and held the weight of them. "What are you looking at?" Priya texted when I sent her a photo of the pile. "The remains of a story," I replied. "What's the new one?" she asked. I looked around my clean, sunlit studio with a potted fern that refused to die and a cat with a lower resting heart rate than the average monk. I looked at the mug on my counter that read "We contain multitudes and coffee." I looked at a calendar with small squares of quiet. "The new one," I typed, "is me, paying attention." People expect a dramatic epilogue. An apology letter or a late-night knock or a courtroom. They expect he begged, I don't know, the door of my studio, my forgiveness, the universe. There were no big scenes. There were the small scenes of becoming. I passed Colin on the sidewalk once the following spring. He looked the same, hoodie, scuffed shoes, that way of standing around at the edge of an idea as if it will invite him in. He nodded, I nodded back. That was all. I didn't stop. He didn't either. Money does not interest me in the way people talk about it, as a pile. Money interests me as a map. I drew mine clearly. I put $50 aside each month for indulgences that made life brighter, a record player found in a second-hand shop, a train ticket to the coast, an absurdly good jar of jam. I upped my emergency fund because I have learned nothing is more expensive than pretending. I started a separate account called Future Amélie and made small offerings to it like a ritual. She didn't write back, future me, but when rent hit and I felt peaceful instead of flayed, I imagined she sent a postcard, "Keep going." Some nights I pictured the conversation with Eliza playing on a loop in kitchens all over the city, bank reps gently instructing boyfriends and cousins and exes that without authorization, they cannot access this account, this life, this name. I pictured women learning the sentence "I do not authorize" and practicing it in mirrors until it sat on their tongues like a yes to themselves. I pictured a world where we grow up with a script not for how to survive a grand romance, but for how to spot when love tries to borrow your credit limit. I pictured giving that to my younger cousins, to the girl I used to be. On the anniversary of the freeze, dates stick to me, I like the order of them, I sent Eliza a thank you note care of the bank's general address. It felt silly, but I wrote it anyway, "Thank you for doing your job. Thank you for speaking clearly." It made it easier for me to do the same. I got no reply, which is exactly the kind of professionalism I had appreciated. I imagined her voice protecting a dozen other people who needed it that day. I hoped she liked her coffee. The grief for the relationship didn't arrive as a deluge, then dry. It came like weather, patches of gray that rolled in and out. I grieved the time, the trust, the Saturday mornings. I even grieved the version of me who had accepted the micro-lies, because she had been trying. I didn't grieve the card. It hadn't belonged to me. One evening, I hosted a dinner party in my studio, which meant 4 friends sitting on cushions around a coffee table. I made pasta that was half recipe, half instinct. We drank cheap wine that tasted expensive because we were together. After dessert, Priya grabbed my hand and drew a little circle in the air. "Us bubble," she said, and I laughed so hard the cat fled. "What?" she asked, innocent. "Nothing," I said, and thought, but everything. The difference between the old bubble and this one was agency. We chose our circle. We named what could enter. We did not spend it like it belonged to someone else. When they left, I washed the dishes slowly, the way I sometimes stretch a song, so it lasts the length of a sunset. I dried the mugs and put them back in their place, each thing where it belongs. It was a relief, that phrase. Later, in bed, I wrote down the day's expenses and the day's delights, because both deserved their ledger: dumplings for lunch with a coworker, new socks because the old ones had thinned and I no longer believed holes were proof of virtue, sunlight on my plants, a text from my mother with a photo of her basil, a call from my aunt reminding me she'd send me her old Dutch oven, the way my body felt after a run like a dozen small doors had opened inside. I wrote, I froze a card and thought a life. I wrote, I do not authorize. I wrote, I do. I do authorize myself, I thought, smiling at the melodrama of that. We are all a little theatrical when we get free. We can afford it. The next morning, I bought olive oil, good olive oil, the peppery kind that bites back, because life is too short to pretend your tongue doesn't notice. I smiled at the cashier. He said, "New place," in that way people do when happiness changes your gait. I nodded. "Nice," he said, and bagged the bottle like he was packing something fragile. He was. Outside, the air had that early summer edge that makes you believe in second chances. I walked home. I unlocked my door. I stepped into my studio, into my life. Mr. Pink announced himself with a chirp. I poured a little oil into a dish and took a piece of bread and tasted, and the heat hit the back of my throat the way certainty does. I stood at my counter and thought about all the futures that hinge on ordinary afternoons. I stood and promised the ordinary my whole attention. I checked my mail. A plain white envelope. My name, Amélie Tran. I opened it, slow. Inside, my annual credit report, neat columns and scores that made me feel like a student being graded by invisible teachers. I ran my finger down the lines. No new accounts. No surprises. The freeze was still noted. The score had rebounded. My heart did too. I looked out the window at the brick wall catching light. If I squinted, it looked like a quilt. If I widened my eyes, it looked like a canvas. Both things are true about most walls. I finished my bread. I washed the dish. I put the olive oil away, the way you place something back where it belongs after you have used it with care. I stood in the middle of my studio and stretched my arms and felt the room stretch back around me, expansive in the way a room becomes when you know where everything is and nothing is hiding, not even you. On my way to work, I passed a flyer taped to a lamp post: free workshop, financial self-defense for women. I tore off a tab, just in case. I thought about teaching my own workshop someday, how to freeze a card and let him argue with the bank. Before, I would have worried it sounded petty. Now, it sounded like a curriculum. In the office, I opened a blank file for a new design project. The cursor blinked. I wrote the title in the top left corner in a bold font because I wanted it that way. He hid a secret credit card in my name. I froze it and let him argue with the bank. It read like a headline. It read like a thesis. It read like a story I could tell, so the next person who needed it would know the steps. Then I added a subtitle because I am a designer and cannot leave good enough alone, and I kept the part of me that believed I was allowed to decide. I looked at it, laughed at myself, and deleted the subtitle. Sometimes design is restraint. The cursor blinked. Outside, someone's dog barked. The day started. I began. The end.